¿Qué tal, Armando Soto? Habla Laudelina Martínez desde Martínez Gallery. Hello, Armando Soto.
Buenas, ¿cómo está?
This is Laudelina Martínez from Martínez Gallery, who is conducting an interview of Armando Soto, a visual artist, whose last exhibition, Am I a Rican, was a virtual exhibition in the Martínez Gallery website. And so we have the opportunity today to ask Armando a number of questions. And I'm really happy that he accepted. He's been an artist for many, many years. And so we'll go a little bit over some of his memories and then also something about his practice. We want to know what it is that makes an Armando Soto painting an Armando Soto painting. So Armando, tell us about your childhood. Where were you born and how did you learn about art?
Well, I was born in New York, okay, in 1945. All right, I'm not a spring chicken or anything. Been around for a while. And I was raised basically by my mother and my aunt because my father was a merchant marine and he was always moving about. So my mother spent a lot of time alone taking care of us. And since she did not have money in order to buy me art materials, I would wait for her, or I would go with her to the shopping center, or what we used to call the AMP at that time, American and Pacific Markets. And there I would bring back the paper bags, the big paper bags, and I would lay them on the floor and cut them to different sizes. And I would make my drawings through there. I was also inspired, very interesting, by a TV program uh, of an artist that taught drawing, and his name was John Eggy. Okay, and he taught the individual how to use basic shapes like the circle, square, rectangle, and sphere in order to make any type of image. And in learning that process, I would follow him while he would make certain pictures. And it was all based on drawing, okay, because he did not teach use of color or anything like that. It was just a basic drawing session that he would teach. And it was very inspiring. It has always stayed with me. And I have used those methods when I've taught currently. Yeah, and that was one of the ways I got inspired by art uh, at a very young age, but I didn't pay much attention to it at that time. And I was growing up, went to junior high school, and in junior high school they had at one point pulled me into a specific drawing class, and this was in West Harlem, PS 43, which was Manhattanville area of New York. And I remember the teacher. The teacher was Mr. Lewis, and he would always handpick different students in from different classes to make up his class, which was all made up of a lot of the kids that like art. And the thing about it was that at that point, I wasn't, really digesting a lot of things, and I didn't like the competition. Okay, at that time, I didn't like the competition of the art because there were everybody was competing against each other to a certain point, and he would have us compete, at certain times. And been very elusive about that situation of competing. People.
So Armando, from that beginning, how did you actually decide that you wanted to study art and make art your life's concern? How did you do that?
Okay. Well, as I was growing older, I met other younger, uh, younger persons that were. One of them was living in my building in West Harlem. I was living in the projects at that time on 125th Street, and his name was Adrian Garcia, who is mentioned in part of the Taller group. And Adrian and I, we used to hang out. We listened to music, and he was a very talented artist. And he went to the School of Visual Arts. And at that time, I was painting a lot of geometric uh, concepts, as opposed to figurative images that I do today. I was influenced, by artists like Ad Reinhardt and other artists of that period that were pure minimalists, Hans Hoffman, for example. So forth, it was just being color, line, and those elements, but no imagery involved in it. As I was later to be exposed to, that had to do with being with other artists that exposed me to these images that I took in and started to use. Uh, and during that period, I met because Adrian had gone to the School of Visual Arts. There, uh, he introduced me to Martin Rubio, and he introduced me to Marcos Dimas. You see, and at that time, there was something very interesting happening because there we had given a show at a place called the Loeb Student Center in New York City, Manhattan, uh, New York University, and the Latino group there invited a large group of young Puerto Rican artists to give a show, and from that created a springboard for a person that we met by the name of Hector Alvarez, who used to work for the state. He was a graphic designer, but he was much older than we were. And he decided to say, hey, let's put a show together. Okay, I know this person named Henry Gent, who was one of the directors of the galleries in the Brooklyn Museum. Okay, and there he got us all together and decided to give us a show. And that was one of the first contemporary shows of New York Puerto Rican artists of our age, you see. And we were, what, 20s, Martin, very young, the young, very young, and Marcus, we were all very young, aspiring artists. It's not been,
So
yeah.
you mentioned the Taller Boricua. Would you say something about it?
Oh,
Because this
well,
must have been the time when you became part of it. You obviously mentioned some of the early members, and you were one of the early members of the Taller, which is usually described in English as the Puerto Rican workshop. Tell us something about how it started.
well, the Puerto Rican workshop uh, started uh, as we all got together, and that was right after the show, after the Brooklyn Museum show. And what happened was that we met some other folks that were offering a space. Okay, and one of the individuals there, he was one of the politicians in East Harlem. His name was Harry Quintana. Okay, and Harry Quintana was part of a group called the Real Great Society, which was based on motivating young people and basically young Puerto Ricans, because this he was based in Harlem, aspiring for higher educational goals. Okay, trying to get them into colleges and finishing schools and whatnot, and at that approach. And we were offered space there. Marcus, uh, Martin and myself, Adrian, along with another person who was known as Manuel Otero, and he was an exchange student from uh, Puerto Rico to Columbia University, and he was studying uh, architecture. Okay, and at the same time, he was a very talented artist, besides a talented architect, and he helped us organize into a group that later we were able to bring in artists like Carlos Osorio, okay, who was a Puerto Rican artist already known on the island and was here in the United States. And I had approached them personally to ask them to become, if he wanted to join our group. And we were looking at them as mentors, okay, that became part of our group. Along with Osorio, uh, there was Rafael Tufino, who was also very well known in the island, and uh, he became part of our group as well, along with his daughter, Nita Tufino. So there we had already a group. At that time, uh, the building in that we were housed on Fifth Avenue in East Harlem. Uh, we were right across the street from other activist groups like the Young Lords and stuff like that. But the building was back in rent, and we had to leave. So we found, with the help of Manuel, uh, we found another studio, a storefront up in Second Avenue in East Harlem, around 103rd, 104th Street, around that area. Okay, and that was one that officially uh, became sort of like the first taller that was part of our group, not being housed in another group of the Rio Grande Society. Uh, at that point, we, there were a lot of things that were happening. I was married, and I had a child. Things were not, they were very intense because the art scene does not work too well with sometimes with having a family and whatnot, because if you're not making the income. My idea at one point was to become a commercial artist, and I had gone through certain training for that, but I decided that that was not, you know, it was too strenuous in what they wanted. You were not doing the work that you would like to do. You were always doing somebody else's work. Okay, uh, that's good for some people. The money was good, but also I ended up in another place called Atelier Molo, which was a French and American organization, and it was a print shop. And it was a print shop that dealt with lithography, and they dealt with very specialized type of graphic arts. The family had a long tradition of even going back to working with actually Toulouse-Lautrec in France. And there I was exposed to a lot of very fine art that was being developed by all these contemporary artists that were coming through uh, this taller. You know, Jim Rosenquist, Larry Rivers. We even seen Yoko Ono and John Lennon coming through there, where he did some stuff. But I was always interested in what different artists were doing. And that was a good exposure to a variety of art that you don't usually have a chance to see, and artists that you don't have a chance to see. Uh,
So tell me something. Do you, do you see yourself as part of a generation? You're mentioning a number of people. Obviously, there were groups that came in and out, but do you feel that you belong to a generation? Do you feel comfortable with the label of Nuyorican, do you think that there were things that people at the same time that you were coming up and making decisions and so on, do you think that you had some shared values, some notions about how art should be?
Uh, uh, the New York Rican experience, as I would say, uh, is one that has to do with the young Puerto Rican that was raised here in New York City. Okay? Totally, it was a different experience as opposed to the one that has been living in the island. Okay, and I have also experienced to a certain point that there was a different outlook or a different way of looking at the New York Puerto Rican as opposed to the ones in the island. Okay, uh, it developed a unique way of expressing yourself because we we created a very interesting form of communication where we would mix what they call Spanglish, you see, where we would mix Spanish and English. Okay, I was raised in a neighborhood where most of the people that were living there, que eran puertorriqueños, that were Puerto Ricans, were just fresh off the boat, what we would say. They just came off the boat or they came off the airplane and whatnot, and they were always speaking Spanish, you see. So my experience was I had to learn English when I went to school. Okay. In my house, my mother spoke Spanish. I would make believe that I would speak English, but it would make, and so forth. Um, and I think that that was a very unique, that's a unique experience that many New York Ricans would say. I do not see myself as a Latinx, no way. Okay. The Latinx takes away the identity and groups us all together. And in Latin America and Cuba or all over, everybody's distinct. They have their own culture and they have their own way of expressing themselves. Now, uh, that has been a way, I've met many artists, uh, for example, Martin, Marcus, and so forth, and Adrian have developed this unique way of expressing themselves, but that occurred here through these experiences. Okay. Uh,
So finally, where did you go to school? I think I know, but finally, where did you go to school, and did it have an effect on you?
okay. I did study at Pratt Institute, okay, in New York, Brooklyn. Okay. Pratt had a very interesting program, okay, because they would always express is how you think as an artist as opposed to getting into the disciplines of learning how to draw perfect or all that, because you could always go someplace and do that. But to think how you put things together. So they exposed us to many different types of experiences in the classroom. Uh, by doing sculpture, by doing three-dimensional stuff, by working with charcoal paint, mixed medias, and stuff like that, combining and using your creativity in that way. From that, I learned. I started working with rooftops. I was doing a whole series of rooftops in New York. And a friend of mine, and he was one of my mentors at Pratt. He said, "Hey, man, that is really political, even though you don't think so, because well, where did we go at one time in New York? If it wasn't for being in the roof. That was our way of getting away from everything or trying to get some fresh air in a crowded city. So there was that type of experience. Another one was as part of the taller, okay, uh, we looked for symbols to connect to our cultural heritage. And a lot of them were Taino symbols. Okay. And at one point, each one of us picked a symbol, a Taino symbol to identify us and our name, So everybody had a certain symbol, almost like a tag, that they would sign at the corner of their art piece and so forth, and the taller was also, in that way, knowing and talking with Carlo, talking with Tofino, exchanging ideas, I was exposed more to more of the imagery and what the images of Puerto Rico were about that I could incorporate into my understanding, okay? Because I like color, all right? And I seek images that reflect my culture through music and those symbols as well, because I do love music. So a lot has to do with looking for percussionists, looking for musicians, looking for them that I can interpret in my own way using the colors that reflect the Caribbean kind of feeling. Okay.
So, how do you see your practice now, in contrast to the way you were looking at your practice when you began, and then when you became a little bit more entrenched in art? How have you been, let's say, in the last 20 or 30 years? What has inspired you? What are some of the things that you have been looking at?
Uh, yeah, well, it's been a gradual development. Everything is a journey. You begin, at one point, and you think that this is where you're going to be at. But as you grow older, okay, and you keep doing the work, you see your work developing in a certain way. Uh, I, for me, I love working with the Taino images and because you could express them in multiple ways. I like listening to music and being inspired by musicians that have done some incredible stuff with Latin music or and basically like for example artists like Tito Puente, move me, Pancho Sanchez move me, Ray Guerrero, because even though Puente was from New York, okay, he was born in New York. Ray Barretto was raised in New York City. So it's that combination of that Caribbean element with that New York experience that I look for also, and that has become part of my art. You see? Uh, that comes in subconsciously. Sometimes you're not even aware of it at the time until you look at it. Oh, I understand. That's where that's coming from.
And
So,
Armando, I know you're a very good teacher. You teach here in Troy at the Art Center for the Capital Region,
um,
and you've been involved with young people. But what do you want your legacy to be? When you think of the work that you've done, both as an educator and then also as an artist, what do you want your legacy to be?
uh, well, my legacy, the way I would like it to be or remembered, is that uh, I was always looking for when I'm teaching the possibilities that the other person has, okay? And what they have to offer, because sometimes uh, I realize I teach a class that people come in apprehensive and then they come out doing a variety of different things and they're very happy about it, So it's looking for that element, or not element, but giving the person the validity that they are also creative. You see? And that's part of the legacy that I would like to leave. As a teacher, as far as the art, that they would see what I was trying to say, or try to understand what I'm trying to say through these images that I put forward. And that is not going to fit well with everybody. Everybody has their, that's the thing about art, that everybody has different types of tastes. You know, everybody uh, has their own opinion of what art is, or what they like and what they dislike. So you're not going to satisfy everybody. But at least, I gave it a nice long run. you know, you see, I'm still around. So at that point, and I'm still hope to create more and so forth. But that's what I would like to leave my legacy as. That
Well, we want you to create more, that's for sure. We want you to continue connecting to the various uh, backgrounds that we have as people from the Caribbean, particularly the Taino background. And I want to thank you for joining us today and telling us something about your background. I hope that we'll have a chance to have another conversation soon. And I invite people who are watching us to go to www.martinezgallery.org and look at the exhibition Amayo New Rican and see some of the fantastic work that Armando Soto has in that exhibition. Thank you very much. Hasta luego.